You may begin. A lot of times I'm driving, there's nothing to do, and I shuffle through the radio before I unglue. There's a lot of red on ways, it's traffic, I'm screwed, and I'm wired a bit different than a regular dude. It's not a bad thing, I embrace it, it's true. The radio don't stimulate brain chemistry fluid. The Buddha found nirvana and the Four Noble Truths. Through a meditative process, right action he proved. For me, I require the use of a tool, a detector, pin, pointer, shovel, and beach scoop. I'm meant to work the dirt with my history crew, but everywhere I look, my interest taboo. Most people choose Bieber over Tippy Canoe. What does a detectorist listen to when the radio is full of bad music and news? I need an alternative for me to peruse. Beyond Sight and Sound gets fantastic reviews. A metal detecting show where my thought bubble brews.
Are you looking for a high-quality beach and sand scoop? Are you trying to take your hunting to the extreme? How about an American-based company that stands behind their product and everything they sell? Then check out our friends over at XTREME Scoops. John has been making scoops for some time now and makes a quality beach and sand scoop to take your hunting to the next level. XTREME Scoops recently released their new sand shredder that works great in the water and on the beach. And if you're a new Equinox user, you may want to check out his Surfmaster X3 that can trap those small targets you new Equinox users are finding out there. XTREME Scoop's company approach is let's do it right. So do it right, buy it once, and go to the extreme. XTREMEScoops.com. That's XTREME scoops.com.
Hey boys and girls, we are going to talk about S&W shooters and prospectors. What is S&W shooters and prospectors?
We at S&W Shooters and Prospectors help people find treasure.
Did you say treasure?
Yes, treasure. Just listen to this amazing review from our happy customer, Jackie Sparrow.
Chocolate ship-shape and a pleasure to deal with. I was able to buy everything that I needed at prices that were shillings less than others. I found my 9 pieces of 8 in no time. Savvy?
I know you're asking yourself, why should I shop at S&W Shooter and Prospectors?
Chuck Smalley has over 45 years of metal detecting experience. He works with each customer one-on-one to customize their setup to match their skill level.
So if you always dreamt of being a pirate, contact Chuck at S&W Shooters and Prospectors and he'll take a great deal for you.
Eye patch and rum not included.
Caution. Please do not operate motor vehicles or power equipment while under the influence of this show. Listening to this show could cause side effects such as bouts of laughter, violent binges of cabin fever, and even dreams of silver and gold. Please be advised. Now that the fine print is out of the way, on with the show. All right, we're back. We're live once again. You are listening to Beyond Sight and Sound, metal detecting and treasure hunting radio for all the really cool digging people out there. And I know it sounds tough for those of us that are in the northern areas, but it is starting to warm up a little bit, thankfully. Before we get started, links in the description. Our friends over at Shooters and Prospectors, Chuck Smalley, the man with the plan, XTREME Scoops, DETECTEES.com, TheRingFinders, All Metal Militia, Detected Outdoors, Ohio Metal Detecting, Crazy Spider Adventures, Nokta Makro website, Mini Horde commercial. Oh, quite a few, as well as Treasure Hunting Outfitters. That link is in the description as well. And we do see tonight in the chat, I already see Charlene in there. So for everyone who hasn't, may want to take a moment and wish her a belated happy birthday. Wasn't but a few days ago, I do believe she had a birthday. And I don't know, what, 21 now, Andy? 25?
We'll go with 21. I figure that'll limit the number of lumps I get on my head.
There you go. There you go. So obviously we've got Andy back tonight. He was back in December to talk about the Simplex book. And for those who haven't realized, the 22nd, I believe, the updated Equinox book was released. So we do have him on to discuss a little bit about the Equinox book, the updated one, as well as, where did that go? There we go. As well as some more of his very entertaining detecting adventure stories that he shared with us when he was on in December. But we've got a caller that's come through already. Go ahead there, Tony.
Hey, how we doing, Josh?
All right. We've got Andy on with us tonight. You got any questions for him about the Equinox?
Let's see. Well, it's been a while since I used it, since Florida, but let's see. God, right offhand, I can't think of anything right offhand, but I did have a question, but maybe it'll come to me in a bit.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the Equinox. Andy's definitely a wealth of information when it comes to detecting. What was your question?
Well, I'm trying to say, I just got in from ice fishing. I'm flying home to hurry up and get online because I didn't know the number, and I had to wait till I got home, so... Let's see. Oh, God. No, at the moment, I can't think of one right offhand.
Okay, well, I guess if you remember the question, you can definitely call back in and shoot that at him.
Yeah, I can. But can I talk real quick about down there in Florida? Real quick?
I guess if it's real quick, because we don't want to cut into Andy's time. Yeah. He's here to talk about the book.
No. Yeah, no. All I want to do is say that it was a wonderful event, well planned. Had a really great time, and yeah, I did get a new name for sure. Yes.
Right.
So, but that's about it. When we were coming home, driving home yesterday, I asked Josh or John. Go, hey, but he's listening to the other one. Man,
well,
I can't.
I'll tell you what, Frank. If you can remember that, give us a call all Sunday, okay, and we'll get you all taken care of.
Okay, I appreciate it. I didn't think I'd be on this quick. That's why I did. We'll do then.
Thanks for the call.
And tell Andy, hey, good job on your books, Andy. You do a good job. So
I appreciate it.
Yep, and we'll talk to you later then, Josh. Take care.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So we've had, I guess, getting right into the book, I believe, and unless I got the date confused, it was released on the 22nd then. So those are currently available.
We were hoping for the 22nd. Between the snow and everything else here, as well as all up and down the East Coast, they didn't get delivered until late last night. So the truck showed up yesterday, and we're just now starting to get them boxed up and shipped out. So the printer did ship a bunch over to Europe to our distributor over there, but the rest of them will be going out this week. So they didn't show up until yesterday, so a few days late.
Well, that's not bad, especially considering all of the havoc that the weather has played in recent days and weeks. I mean, the South has been it's just been getting tore up. Ice, snow, sleet, rain, depending on where you're located.
I'm starting to wonder about our luck, because last year is when we moved to Mississippi, and it was February of last year that they had record flooding here, and actually it was the third highest flood stages they've ever recorded in Jackson.
Oh,
that's what
no.
That's what we had last February. This February, about a year, almost to the day, we had the worst ice storm in 31 years. So, we saw temperatures that literally were 20 degrees colder than Detroit, 1,000 miles north. So the fact that we were down in single digits without the wind chill here in Mississippi is just absolutely unheard of.
Yeah, that's crazy. And suddenly you're kind of going, was pulling up out of Michigan the right choice?
Yeah, people in Michigan were calling me, my old hunting buddies, saying, hey, you ought to come back up. It's a lot warmer up here.
Right, come up and hunt with us. Definitely. With the release of the updated Equinox book, there's been, 2 updates to the Equinox platform since the last Equinox handbook. So there's got to be quite a bit of information in the new one.
Yeah, I mean, I started out with just saying, because it came time to do a reprint, and I said, do I want to reprint it or try to bring it current? So I figured I'd do a little bit of a tweak here and a tweak there to try to get it updated. Unfortunately, when you start looking at it and realizing how much has changed and how much we've all learned using the Equinox in the year and a half plus since the first book came out, it didn't make any sense to just tweak it. So I think there's only 1 or 2 pictures that are the same from the first book. Everything from, finds to settings. A lot of the programs have been tweaked and adjusted. They've all been updated. And I appreciate some of the guys like Todd Yerkes, CT Todd on the forums. He's a wealth of information. I mean, he's a guy that's, he's an electronic guru himself, so he understands the machines, but he doesn't try to overanalyze it. He says it does what it does, and as long as he understands it and he can explain it, this book is not designed to try to make it more technical than it needs to be. I don't think any of us really care what processor it uses or how many pixels the screen has. It's not designed to be a technical book. It's designed to help you detechnify the machine. So Like I said, Todd Yerkes, Gary Kilmer, two top-notch hunters from up in the Northeast, their settings are in there. Chuck Smalley's got a whole section I put in on Chuck with some of his basic out-of-the-box settings that he gets his customers dialed in with that have been proven to work. As a matter of fact, one of his customers started with a lower-priced machine, moved up to the Equinox, and he sent me some pictures, and I couldn't believe he's only been hunting with it since July. And that's
making killer finds.
Yeah. So the purpose of the book is to give everybody the first part of the book follows the same format I've found works. And that gives you a solid understanding of what all the functions do. And obviously some of the new features are the F2 iron bias setting. What is it? When do you want to use it? The 4 kilohertz, the new 4 kilohertz single frequency. What is it? Why would you benefit from using it? And then the sections talk about some general questions and answers that you see asked on all of the forums. So what I did is I kind of collected a dozen of those questions because you see them asked all the time. Somebody gets a new machine, they ask the same question.
Right.
And answered it so that they don't have to ask the same question and people get snippy when they start responding. Hey, I've heard this 4 times. Are you an idiot? So I think sometimes people don't think before they hit post on the forums when they respond to questions. And then there's the chapters on coin hunting, relic hunting, beach hunting, competition hunting, things like that. And then there's a ton of new accessories, which we cover as well, which, again, a lot of people say, well, I saw that on the internet. What we've found, particularly the older generation, they're not on Facebook. They don't live on YouTube. So
exactly.
Just because you've seen it on Facebook, 90% of the people don't even go on Facebook.
Yeah, just because a lot of people have seen it doesn't mean that everybody knows about it, and it would be beneficial to have information like that in the book for those that they don't interact on social media, or maybe they don't even hardly get on a computer other than check their email or something.
Well, we had we belonged to the Michigan Treasure Hunters Club up there in Detroit when we lived up there, and it's been in operation for almost 40 years now. And they've got 150, 160 members. And my wife was new. She was in charge of the newsletter for a few years till she became president of the club. But she found that there was about 20 of those 150, 60 members that didn't even have an email address, let alone go on social media. So they need a hard copy. So that, there's still people out there that don't live on social media.
Yeah, some people, especially when it comes to books, I mean, sure, some people are big on Kindle and the ebook and stuff like that, but there are still a lot of people out there, a vast majority, that prefer the old-fashioned book.
Yeah, I mean, computer screens are great, but even when I do stuff for work, if it's a multi-page document, I need to review something, I like to print it out so I can mark it up, put notes in the margin, highlight things, which, it's not really doable when you've got an electronic format.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes those things don't, sometimes if you've got a PDF file, the digital copy of the book that you're sending to print, sometimes that format doesn't carry over well to a ebook format, and you have to go through and restructure the whole thing.
And we've had people ask us for ebooks, and I understand some of the requests have been from countries where postage is prohibitive to send a copy. But there's people that say, well, I want an ebook so that I can put it on my phone and take it out in the field with me. And, unfortunately, as you know, the problem with any ebook format is protection is something a 12-year-old can override. So, and again, I'm not trying to say we do this strictly to sell copies, but I also don't want to sell one copy and have 500 people using it. So
right.
Having any kind of protection and making it cross-platform applicable, that they can use it on a Kindle or an e-reader or the computer or their phone, there's an awful lot of work that goes into that. Just generating the book and creating a PDF that passes pre-flight at the printers is a job and a half. Now, if I have to combine that with 20 different platforms, that'd be a full-time job.
Yeah, it's cost prohibitive. Not to mention the time involved in it.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that it seems like a lot of people have been confused about, well, two actually, that a lot of people have been confused about since the updates have come around are the FE2 iron bias and the 4 kilohertz edition. Because I know we've had to mention here on the show a number of times that the addition of 4 kilohertz doesn't do anything for you when you're in multi-frequency, because it is only affecting the single frequency side. And a lot of people seem to not understand that, or even understand why or when they should use FE2 or the 4 kilohertz frequency like you had mentioned. But it was nice to see them make those additions, and there's been a number of people too that have complained about, oh, well, I think the detector performs worse since I updated it. I wish I hadn't have done it. Well, for a lot of users, I don't think they realize that just because you update, if you don't like it, it's an easy fix. You can go back.
Exactly. I mean, when you plug in the Minelab update utility, first of all, they've come light years ahead of what the CTX update capabilities was, and even though the 3030 didn't get a lot of updates, this one you plug it in, it tells you right away what version of software you're in, and then you pick the one from the list, so you can go back to version 1, version 2, or version 3. So you can simply, I don't like 3, let me go back to 2, let me go back to 1, let me go back to the way it was when we first bought the machine, and you can do that pretty easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what does FE2 do? FE2, the main reason or the F2, was to deal with the round rusted iron bottle caps, things like that. Like many double D coils, it hits a rusted bottle cap, for example, a round piece of iron, like a coin, gives you a high number. Well, the F2 option allows you to get better discernment, so it'll tell you whether or not it is or is not a piece of iron. You'll hear it in the sound. You'll get the numbers jumping around. So the F2 option allows you to, if that's a problem in your hunt site, then you'd select F2. If nails or just general iron is the issue, then you'd be using FE. And one of the things that I've found talking to people over the last year or so since that came out at hunts is that they thought you can set your FE and then you can set your F2 and they work in combination. It's
and
not.
They don't.
It's one or the other. You either select FE and adjust that, or you select F2 and adjust that. And if you adjust F2, FE is out of the equation. So when you see people say, well, I set my FE at this and my F2 at this, it's meaningless. It doesn't do anything. It's one setting or the other.
Exactly. Very well put. And I believe I think we've got a caller on with us. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, Josh. How's it going?
Ah, there he is. Crazy Spider.
Hey, Andy. We have not had the pleasure to meet yet. I was just curious. You have quite the array of different handbooks and guides that are out there. But I was just curious, have you ever toyed with the idea or had kind of the urge to maybe spread out from the handbooks and get into any sort of writing other than just the handbooks, metal detecting wise?
Well, I mean, actually, the first book I put out was called Advanced Waterworking Techniques. That's when waterworking was still a handful of us nuts that went into the water modifying land equipment. So I've done that. I've had put out the Treasure Hunter's Handbook and Buyer's Guide back in about 8 or 9 years ago. My wife is pushing me. I've had a lot of people ask me for an updated Treasure Hunter's Handbook, and that covers everything from equipment selection and use to site research to find identification and liquidation. So I've kind of kept that updated of it on the back burner. That's probably going to be the next book that comes out of the chute, which will be the later this year, the Metal Detecting Handbook, and that's going to be a fairly comprehensive book, probably 200 plus pages. But I think that's kind of what you were asking about.
Nice.
That's awesome to hear. I appreciate that.
There's a lot of techniques, and again, Todd Yerk's a good friend of mine. What he always says is, he buys a ton of books. I probably have a couple hundred books and a couple thousand magazines in my library. If I get one tip out of a book, even if it's a $20 book, believe me, that tip pays for itself going forward. And it's something you can always go back. I mean, I pull up, Charles Garrett's coin hunting book, that I bought back in the 70s. And I'll go through and I'll say, you know what, I hadn't thought of hunting this kind of site again. And it just kind of jars something. And that one little tip pays off tenfold when you get out in the field. So, I'm a firm believer that, $20 for the amount of work and the input that you get. Because, again, there's some other books out there that individuals write and it's their perspective. My books, I tend to put my perspective, but I temper it with that from experts from around the world. That's the one thing I like about the internet and social media is I can reach out to recognize experts and get their input. So I think this book I've probably added a few more. So we probably got almost 15 or 18 recognized experts that have provided their input in terms of tips and settings.
Nice.
That's awesome. I'm going to exit out here, but on my way out, I'm going to throw another little fun question out there for you. One, what is your favorite, part A and B here, what's your favorite place to hunt in the world? Doesn't have to be the U.S. And two, who have you not hunted with that you'd really like to hunt? Have a good night, guys.
So what's my most interesting place to hunt in the world? Honestly, I think, the history that you can get to once you leave the United States is really...
it's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. I mean, we I've hunted in Russia, I've hunted in Africa, I've hunted in England and in the UK, Scotland. When you touch something that the last time it saw the light of day was 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, I mean that's you get chills in the back of your neck when you actually find something like that. it was interesting. 30 years ago, I was hunting. I rented a car and went across the country of Morocco, landed in the pier there in Morocco, and drove across country and did some sightseeing. But we stopped in these rural villages where there was a well in the center of the town, and it's all dirt roads. And we get out there and we did some metal detecting, and we had all these people come up and ask us what we're doing and look at us. But you're finding coins that are just laying there an inch or two under the sand that go back 500, 800, 1,000 years, and they're just laying there. So
right.
Being able to touch that history, and especially that's what I like about when we do our trips to Scotland. It's one thing to get put on some ground and say, hey, there's some history out here, go see what you can find. But Toddy, the guy that we use over in Scotland, not only does he put you on the right spot, but he gives you the history. So he paints the picture of where it is you're going to hunt. And, he tells you this was a castle and here's the time frame. And then when you find something, he can tell you the story behind each of those finds. So to me, that really makes history come alive.
Yeah, absolutely. And even adds more of a personal value to the item that you've found, because now you know the history behind it. He's been able to identify it right there for you and tell you the story of it.
Yeah, I mean, the age of places over in Europe. I mean, I remember a few years ago, I met a guy at a place we were hunting in England, and we kind of hit it off, and we were talking at dinner one night, and he said, we were talking about houses, and I told him that we had an old house in Michigan, and our house dated back to 1843. I said it was one of the oldest houses in town. And he kind of looked at me and he laughed, and he says, really? He said, I've got a house that was built in the 1700s, and it's one of the newest houses in town. So, it's all relative.
That's a heck of a problem. It's just a stone's throw away, basically. It's all over the place over there.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But yeah, I mean, just to kind of wrap up the discussion on the book before we get into some kind of stories and lessons learned. And, again, I really think the book came out well. And again, the feedback you get, the input you get, and even the finds that people provide, I mean, it kind of gives you something to look at and get motivated to go out there and see what you can find. If you're a coin hunter, there's settings for coins. If you're a relic hunter, there's settings for relics. And the good thing about the input is, here's my settings, and here's why I selected them, and here's what you'd want to change in your area. So it gives you really a guideline to say, you start with this and make these adjustments, and you'll make finds what the individual that provided the settings will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are tried and true, and they even come along with, like you said, explanations as to why you may want to use them in a specific area or something, and it makes the cost of the book well worth the purchase price for people.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's good to see. Like I said, Minelab's done, I believe, 2 updates since the last handbook, so it's good to see that you've come out with an updated version that includes the updates. And it looks like we've got Fred from New Jersey on with us. You have a question for Andy, Fred?
Yeah, so a quick question. I don't want to take too much time, Josh. I'm glad you have Andy on there. I just was curious because Andy is so... how you doing, Andy?
Hey, Fred.
But you're such an expert with both the XP Deus and the 3030 and now the Equinox. What do you feel the Equinox has head and shoulders over the XP Deus, the multi-frequency aspect, or is there any particular thing that you think makes one slightly better than the other? That was my question.
Well, I mean, I think if you take a look at it, it was interesting when Minelab had their dealer conference out in Phoenix when they introduced the Equinox. What they did is they had a big projector and they had a PowerPoint presentation, and they talked about what drove their design of the new machine. Where they went from the CTX to the Equinox, and they had 2 things that they were using as benchmarks. One of them was the Garrett AT Pro, and that was for the price point. And the other one was the XP Deus, which was for the recovery and weight. So that's what they were shooting for. And what they've done with the multi-frequency, so To me, if you put the two side by side, the fact that the Equinox is waterproof and the Deus is not is kind of a plus on the Equinox's side.
That's a big bonus.
Yeah, and then obviously, and you know, Garrett, you've got to give Garrett credit. So Garrett, when they came up with the original AT Pro, they figured out that most people that want to water hunt or just go out in the rain don't care about 200-foot water, depth like the XCal or the CZ, Fisher CZ21. Right. So they came up with a machine that was waterproof so that people can wade, do a little bit of snorkeling, and not flood. But you can go out in the rain and not worry about it getting flooded out. So when we go over to England, it's a challenge because you're out there in the sun. You get up in the morning and you hunt, whether it's raining or whether it's sunny. You go out there with a Deus, which is really our preferred unit over there. Yeah, if it's raining, you've got the control unit in the bag in your pocket and, you're trying to keep your headphones covered up. But, right. So multi-frequency, I'm not sure I see a heck of a lot of difference on land. It's when you get around that mineralized ground, you really mineralized ground, or you get down around salt water. That's where
around the beach, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're a beach hunter, I would recommend, obviously you got the waterproof feature and the multi-frequency. Obviously the Equinox in that point tilts over toward the preferred unit. Other than that, I mean, whenever I go out, I've always got a Deus with either the elliptical HF coil or the 11-inch, X35 coil on it, and regardless of what other machines I've got in the car. So those are my machines when I go out.
Yeah, I just recently this year, or just late last year, I bought an Equinox, so I'm still kind of learning that machine. I have your first book, so I haven't really worked my way through that. And would you, somebody that has your first book, do you think it would be that big of an advantage to buy the second book? I know you'd like to sell it, but you have that much new stuff in there?
There's a lot of information.
Yeah, the new stuff includes programs. So the programs incorporate in some cases, the 4 kilohertz, in some cases, the F2 function. So there are some changes, and depending on the type of sites you hunt, if you're hunting around old foundations or cellar holes where you've got a lot of nails, the settings do give you better performance and better separation than the original ones would.
I'll have to, maybe I'll add that to my library of things. But I don't want, like I said, I don't want to take too much time. I've always been a strong advocate of you and your boot camps, having been to the XP 3 times and the 3030 1 time. Never got to. You have Equinox boot camps?
We had it laid out, but COVID kind of killed it. We weren't able to get any hotel space, and even if you can, I'm not sure people are willing to travel. So until we get out of this restriction and face masks and everything else, I think we're going to hold off on that.
All right. Well, those are my questions, and always enjoyed listening to you. So I'll listen to your show, and I'll let somebody else get in here and ask you some questions. But you're very good for the hobby. You're a master with your detectors, and I always enjoy talking to you and listening to you. So have a good show. And Josh, I'll let you go then. Okay.
All right. Thanks for the call.
Okay. Good night.
Well, and I've said for some time, your books are very well laid out. They're put in very plain layman's terms where whether you're a novice, whether you're an advanced user, every person is going to find at least something in that book that will help better the performance of the machine out in the field at not much of a price at all. So I've got a shelf of your books.
Well, you got one of mine. You got the next one coming, so you can put that on.
Well, I'll definitely make sure to have a space there open for it. Definitely put it up there with the other one and the Deus books and the CTX handbook and all of those others. They're very well put together. Very well put together, and we hope that a number of other people listening tonight will make sure and add it to their collection too. I've been dropping the Treasure Hunting Outfitters website link in the chat throughout the show, and I'm sure they can always get it from their preferred dealer as well. I saw Charlene said that Chuck's books are, I don't know. They may have went out the door today or they're going out tomorrow, but they're on the way.
Yeah, I think the UPS guy, we said we have a pickup, and he backed in the driveway, and we opened up the garage, and suddenly it's like, what? So, yeah, he he got his workout this evening.
Wasn't quite expecting that.
No, the boxes are 35 pounds apiece, and a bunch of boxes went out, so he was doing 35-pound lifts, loading the back of his truck.
Oh, boy. Yeah, he's definitely worked hard for his money today, then. Nothing wrong with that, though. Definitely. Now, and we wanted to make sure and let people know about the Equinox handbook and where they could find it, and some of the little tidbits to maybe entice them to purchase, because it's definitely going to be a good resource, especially for the Equinox users out there, whether they've been using it for a while or just got it. The Equinox is one of the most popular machines on the market currently, along with the Simplex and some of the other machines that are out there now. But another thing that we were hoping to get into, since we had you back on the show again, was some more of your adventurous stories, because that, for the last time you were on the show back in December, for some people that missed the last half of the show, shame on them. They should go back and check that archive. I believe it was December 16th. We were talking about the Simplex Plus handbook. And the stories at the end of the show, it's phenomenal. You need to write a book just of some of your detecting adventures.
Well, I don't know if any of your listeners have ever read a book or a series of book called Never Mace a Skunk. And
Butch Holcomb.
It's a collection of stories kind of along those lines. I think any of us that have been doing this for a number of years kind of have learned some stories. And what I always try to do is kind of couch them in what's the lesson learned, what's the takeaway. So, I guess with that, I mean, here's one. I think my son was connected up, or he was listening to this. So I'll give a shout out to my son, Paul, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And, he's been out since he was old enough to walk. I mean, I've got pictures of him in the old Fisher magazine where I think he was a year and a half or 2 years old, dragging a machine around out in the backyard looking for coins. But when we were living in Georgia, several friends of mine that were dyed and true relic hunters, we decided to go relic hunting in the mountains of North Georgia. And we did this in July, the end of July. So you can imagine anybody that's lived in Georgia in July realizes it's not 70 degrees and no humidity. So we got our backpacks on and, detectors and our boots on and snake gear and camos. And somebody came up with their research and, hey, it's only about a 1.5 mile hike in to get to this place, up and down a couple mountains. So we hiked into this and we hunted this place for 2-3 hours, and I don't think we found a single bullet. So we're at the top of this ridge overlooking this valley trying to figure out where to go next. And my son is standing there, and he's swinging his detector. He's got a low-price Tesoro detector, just a beep dig machine. So we got our maps out, and we're trying to figure out where to go. And he gets a signal near the base of this big old oak tree, and he's digging. And he comes up with some targets, and he comes over and says, hey, is this anything? And it was a George Washington inaugural button.
Oh, my God.
So we're sitting there scratching our head going, how did this happen? We've got $1,000 plus machines, and here's this 12-year-old that just out-hunted us. But my son was smart. He packed the backpack and threw a couple of Gatorades in, and I was the idiot, and I packed a bunch of Diet Cokes in there. So I'm drinking Diet Coke in 90-degree, 90% humidity. And on the way home, I'm like, man, I'm not feeling too good. And I just about wound up going to the hospital with heat stroke. So, a good takeaway from that is if you're out relic hunting, if you're out hunting in this kind of heat, sometimes you get wrapped up in the moment and don't realize you're that close to going to the hospital, or, this could have happened 1.5 miles from back in the woods. If you're out there by yourself, next thing you know, you pass out in the heat and they find you a year later when they got the bleached bones out there.
Yeah, exactly. And it can happen so fast too. we've got Chuck on with us, calling in from Florida.
Hey, how's everybody tonight? Andy, how's it going, my friend?
Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
Pretty good. Actually, I was out today and I'm not used to 80-some degree weather when you leave 10 below.
Well, we had single digits last week, and it was 72 today, so that's how you get sick.
Yep.
That's true.
So I slowed down a little bit, drank a lot of water, and it was funny you mentioned that because I got cooked out today a little bit. But I wanted to thank you, sir, for adding me to the book. You honored me on that, and there's been a lot of questions being asked why we need a second book. What's in the second book? I saw a lot of that, and Andy and I chatted quite a bit, and I think with all that he's talking about with people that don't have Facebook or they don't have a computer, we've got a lot of them without computers. They don't get into that. That will help them, but it will help us too understand every time you make a move on those machines, you can affect something else. You've added other programs in there that the company's having you download, whether you want a 4 kilohertz or not. You know, there's more to it than just add programs.
Right. Anymore, they are basically computers on sticks. So it is nice to have a very, very plain way of explaining it so that anyone can understand it to get themselves out of trouble if they get into a situation where they're going, oh, you know, what did I do? This thing is unstable now.
And Andy has the ability to address metal detecting to you in a light that will help you understand what exactly you're doing no matter what machine you're using and what kind of a move in certain soils. And we're not all the same. And he and I totally believe that just because John Doe out in California has a killer program for California, it doesn't mean it's going to work in Illinois or work in New Jersey or anywhere else.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things that I got feedback even from, I know Chuck and some of the other people that provided input. There were times where, especially over in England, I mean, I got input, but I had to call them up and we'd spend an hour or two on the phone. So they know the machine, but putting it on paper eludes them. So sometimes you know how to use it, but trying to explain it to somebody and put it in layman's terms, which, I mean, honestly, that is one of my fortes. I mean, I do procedure writing and things like that on my normal job. So if I'm able to take nuclear power and simplify it and be able to give it to somebody to use in the plant, that's kind of where I cut my teeth, 40 years ago.
Right.
And that's what I did with this book. So the input I got, I had to first of all make it all look the same. So the settings are all in the same kind of box in the same order, and the explanations have to make sense. So a lot of times, I get input and then I have to call them and follow up. And what do you mean by this? And what about this setting? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So capturing all of that and making sure it looks consistent chapter to chapter, took quite a while.
Good. Well, what the engineers write for us in instructions are at an engineer's level a lot of times. And most people cannot read into what an engineer writes and proceed to put it into layman terms for them to set up a machine properly. Now, there are those that can, and you are very good at being able to set it up and put it in the layman's terms much more than the design engineers at many of the companies we buy detectors from.
Well, and I've seen more than a few in my time where the user manuals leave typos and things like that, and a lot to be desired, where once you get a hold of one of Andy's books, it turns the light bulb on for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll give you an interesting story. Years ago, and I don't know how many of you know the name George Payne, but George was the kind of the father of a lot of the innovations we've got. He worked for White's Electronics back when Ground Balance came out, and then he moved over to Technetics, the original Technetics, out of Oregon that had things like the 9000, the 8500, the Tech Limited. So their technology was first rate. And I was one of their original dealers when they started Technetics. So we got invited to a dealer banquet one night, and I was sitting at the same table as George. And somebody at the table asked him, he said, "George, what's the neatest thing you've ever found?" And his answer kind of stuck with me all these years. He looked at us, he said, "I don't use these things." So he can design it. If you gave him hey, how do you deal with ground mineralization? He could figure it out. But, what have you found? He goes, "I don't use these things." So here's a guy that was the father of a lot of today's inventions, and he never used a metal detector.
Wow.
And it's just like when it's designed, they hand you a print. This is what we want, but then you go down, you follow through, and you start looking at what they were trying to tell you what they want, and it just doesn't quite work as what you see it should work. So then somebody's got to explain to you just what you do, Andy. It will work, but this is how you do it step by step by step.
And there's some other books out there, particularly on the mine labs, that go into such excruciating technical detail. There was one on the MX or the I don't know if it was the MXT or the DFX that I never got through the book. I mean, I tried multiple times. I had a DFX for a number of years, and it was just so technical. I mean, I had my eyes propped open with toothpicks.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a cumbersome read. It's great if you're looking for something to put you to sleep.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not going to help me find anything. And that's, I go back to Todd. Todd, he's helped me at a number of the boot camps. And people ask questions that are, well, how many windings? What's the ratio of the transmit and receive? And he's going, does it matter? It works. Don't worry about it. Let me explain to you how to set it. Don't worry about what's underneath the hood.
Yeah, you don't have to necessarily understand the science behind it. You just need to know that it works in that particular application.
Yep, and how to adjust it. That's it.
And I have customers that'll call me up and they say, "Well, can you explain the eddy current to me better?"
Why?
And I'll just go, why? Well, I understand it as this. I said, "What do you do I'm an electrical engineer. Call Minelab's engineers and they can explain that better. I understand that it's there and what it does, but I can't explain this to you." And, to be factual, 90% of the customers, and I find this, and you and I have talked about this, Andy, they get the machine, they charge it, they turn it on. They don't even hardly know how to turn it on, what sensitivity or ground balance or anything is. They walk outside and they want results now.
Right.
So you got to go back and say, "Listen, here's what you got to do. Get a hold of Andy's book. It will take you step by step and help you understand a little more than the basic knowledge of what a metal detector does, how it excites the metal, responds back, it graphs. It does no metallurgy whatsoever. It's graphing the response. You get this signal back. This is where it's falling into. It's pretty close to being the nickel dime, quarter gold ring, or whatever it is we expect that machine's over the top of. And that's the best that I can explain to you. Now, you need to go back and, get a book like Andy's and work with it, and it will open up a lot more detecting functions on the machine that you have, and I don't care what brand it is.
Well, one thing I've seen, and that's, again, I always warn people, the internet is great, but it makes instant experts out of anybody with a keyboard.
Yes, and it's also full of disinformation.
Right. Well, I mean, this week there was a post, somebody bought a brand new 15-inch Equinox coil. And their question was, do I need to do anything differently when I connect this coil? And one of the posts from somebody that's got a following was, Yes, anytime you change coils or do a software update, you need to do a factory reset.
Why?
I don't know. I mean, but,
exactly.
So I mean, I rarely post that in response, but in this case, there's no. Do not reset. Do not do all your settings are gone if you do a factory preset.
Exactly.
Don't do a factory reset.
No.
That's right.
But so be careful what's out there. There's good information, and there's some stuff that I just look at, even settings. I scratch my head going, why?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a good story. I mean, we had a guy come over to the shop a week or two ago, and he bought a Deus used locally here. And he said the guy he bought it from was a coin hunter, and he wasn't finding anything. And he got a heck of a deal. He paid $400 for a complete WS4 setup, complete thing, brand new coil. Everything. So he says, can you take a look at it and maybe set it up for relics? Because he was a relic hunter before I take it out. I looked at it, I'm going, did you do anything to this? He goes, no. He said, I just picked it up yesterday. I brought it over. This is what he was running. He had everything from 40 to 90 rejected.
Why would you do that?
Well, and then that's why
no wonder he's not finding anything.
Exactly. But that's the problem. So whatever he did, he wound up rejecting all of his coins. That's why he wasn't finding anything. So he got a great deal, and we just made a few changes. And he was out literally 2 days later. He came back. He found an Eagle breastplate.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he's ecstatic. And the other guy sold a machine that he probably lost $800 on.
All because, probably from the sounds of it, he was not very familiar with his machine, did not have a clue what he was doing, and got frustrated with it and sold it at a discount because he figured it wasn't working right. Just goes to show you, know your settings.
Yes.
So I figured let me give you 2 or 3 quick stories here and the lessons learned. Another time, my buddy and I were diving a lake in Pennsylvania, and it was about a 4 or 5 hour drive. So we were going to camp that night. So we went over there. Saturday morning we dove all day. We had a hookah system. Camped that night. The next day we were in the water, and about 4 or 5 o'clock we started getting everything ready and walked back to the van. And I told my buddy, sir, I only had the keys, and he reaches into his wetsuit, and the keys weren't there. So he had wound up. We had to get our gear back everything back on, get our hookah back out. Took us 2 hours of swimming around until we finally found the keys. Thank God we saw them laying there. And because this was before cell phones, and it was miles to the nearest town. So it would have been a heck of a deal. So again, a takeaway there is if you got one of the new cars that's got the little touchpad, make sure you use that. Don't take the keys with you. Especially with these things that are chipped. And if you've got that, get the valet key, which doesn't have that remote on it, because that's $100 right there. And, I've even buried it, just bury the valet key somewhere. But don't ever take it on the beach or in the water with you, because invariably you're going to lose it.
Right. Yep, either that or, leave the fob in the vehicle and take just the key on a key ring and clip it to your carabiner, because if you're on the beach or in the water, you've got a carabiner with you.
Yep.
Or you should have.
And I'll tell you, the worst story that I ever had, I was hunting in Georgia, South Georgia, and I didn't realize this, but, we have quicksand in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Uh-oh.
So I had parked my car, and I'd walked. There was a Confederate cavalry camp. It was about 1.5 miles back in the woods. So I'm walking through the woods, and then there's a creek, and I'm walking across the creek, and I stepped on the sandbar, and the next thing you know, I'm knee deep.
Uh-oh.
And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So I'm starting to sink down into this. I tossed my metal detector across to the other side. And luckily, I use a pick, a mattock, and I was able to just catch the edge of the bank, and there was a root there that I was able to pull myself. But I was down waist deep and going down. I didn't feel anything solid below me, so I was waist deep and going down. Nobody knew where I was other than my car. I said I could just picture that, if I wouldn't have been able to reach the bank, I hate to think what would have happened. So great lesson learned there is don't ever go anywhere without telling people where you are. And if you're going by yourself, think twice, because if something would have happened, I mean, luckily I was able to reach the bank with that Matic. If I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be on the show tonight.
Yeah, always good to hunt with a buddy, maybe even 2 or 3.
Yes. Yes. Oh, wow.
That's a heck of a way to find out that there's quicksand in the area.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I mean, I thought quicksand was the Amazon jungle. I didn't realize you can have it here in the South.
Careful where you step next time, apparently.
Yeah, and you talk about another interesting relic hunt. There were a couple of us. There was 3 of us down in South Carolina. We were in the mountains of South Carolina, North Carolina, and we had done some research, and we were trying to go back through these hills and ravines, and spent half the day hiking in to find this place. And next, we come around a corner, and a buddy of mine goes, "Hey, do you smell that?" I'm like, "Yeah, kind of sweet. I don't know what that is." We came around a corner, and there are 2 guys with their coveralls cooking their mash. And yeah, luckily there was 3 of us and 2 of them, and they had guns, and we're sitting there going, "We're screwed." And all I could picture is Deliverance in the back of my head. But
right.
We had to convince them that we weren't revenuers, and we're leaving, and we didn't see anything. But yeah, that was interesting. Came around, these 2 guys turned around and looked at us and like, we're in the wrong place.
Yep, wrong place, wrong time. Yeah, at that point, I think I'd sooner deal with the alligators.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one last little funny story. So we were hunting the old amusement park up on the Chesapeake Bay called Betterton, and it was interesting. So we usually hunt those in the dead of winter because the water's clear and you don't have a lot of people sightseeing, and so we were out there. We were scuba diving, so we came back up to swap tanks. So we had our tanks sitting against the old seawall. So we came up and sat down, and we're kind of just chit-chatting back and forth. There was 2 of us, and we had our gear and stuff on and getting ready to swap tanks, and we realized that we were both frozen solid to the cement. I mean, literally, we couldn't move. The wetsuit had frozen to the concrete, and we're getting kind of concerned. So the only option is to kind of strip everything down. We're buck naked. It's 20 degrees out, and the wind is blowing. We'll probably wind up pneumonia. Luckily, somebody came walking by with his dog. And said, "Hey, can you do me a favor and go grab an old bucket or something you see down there and throw some water on us to get the suits to thaw out?" And he's looking at us like, "What? What do you guys want me to do?" I'm like, "We're stuck. We can't stand up." So
yeah, I'm sure that's a great way to ruin a wetsuit if you try to stand up at that point.
We couldn't move. I mean, we were literally frozen. Legs and everything were frozen onto that concrete. And I'm like, well, one of us is going to have to take our suit off and, catch pneumonia, getting the other one thawed out.
Well, it's a good thing that the person walking their dog came by at that point. Hopefully saved both of you from getting sick.
So, but yeah, I think all of us that have been out there, we probably had some stories we reflect back, and they're funny now, but somehow at the time it wasn't, we kind of weren't laughing at the time. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The big thing is though, when you get into those situations like that, do you walk away from it going, okay, what did we learn from this, and how do we do things different the next time? Or do you unfortunately not learn from it and continue to kind of beat your head against the wall?
Well, and that's the whole thing. A lot of these stories I tell people, but it's the lessons learned. I mean, the last one I'll leave you with, we were searching an old house up in New York, and it was, the house was, the roof was falling through, and we were in there looking around. There was piles of papers, and we're going through the papers, and this guy that I knew, but I didn't really know, as I will find out. We're going through the paper, and I open an envelope, and there's some green paper in there. Well, he sees it out of the corner of his eye, and he thought it was money. He literally smacked me in the back with the shovel to get that envelope and take off with it.
Wow.
So, important lesson. Make sure if you're going out with somebody that it's somebody you know and somebody you can trust, because somehow if you find something like that, people tend to do funny things when they see dollar signs.
Yeah, absolutely. The envy starts to set in, or jealousy, and before you even know it, I mean, a lot of so-called friendships are broken very quickly when things like that happen.
Yeah.
You start to find out that maybe they weren't as good of a friend as you thought they were.
Well, Chuck, I'm sure you've been through the same thing. What bothers me is when I go out, some of my best hunts have been where I haven't found anything, but the guy I'm with did. It really irks me when you're out hunting and, you happen to, a lot of it's luck, getting your coil across it. And,
Absolutely.
You find a silver dollar, you find a gold ring, and the guy you're with, you can just see he's gritting his teeth. He's pissed off because you found something he didn't find. I'm like, you just took the fun out of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, whatever happened to let's just go out and have fun? But a lot of people, they like to get so competitive with it that it just, like you said, it takes all the fun out of it.
No, I don't go out. If people do that, I had one guy, he wanted to try relic hunting, so I took him out, and everything he found, he'd come over to me, he says, hey, what is this worth? Hey, what is this worth? Hey, what is this?
Right. You're out here for the wrong reasons.
Don't come over because you're getting me in a bad mood. I don't sell anything, so I don't really care what it's worth.
Right. Yeah, and
that's right.
Unfortunately, they're...
One thing I've seen in hunting in gold fields and detecting gold and running gold, you pull out an amount of gold and show someone that you have found this, you could see it in their eyes. Everything just changed. I'm serious.
Yeah.
It totally changes the room. So that's one thing that I rarely do is, oh yeah, here's what I found today, and throw it in a bunch of people, especially if I don't know them all, because the attitude that they have is just went 180 degrees south.
Yep, especially if I don't know them very well. Usually I'm going, I didn't find much. I found a little bit, but nothing to jump up and down about, and keep it nice and low key.
Yep. Pull out a handful of iron pyrite and said, this is all I found. There you go. The story's over.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people see these YouTube videos now, and they think that every signal you get is going to be a gold ring or a silver coin. And to me, that's the one fault I've got with almost every one of those YouTube videos that I've seen is show everything you found. Show me all the junk. I've got 5-gallon buckets full of trash out in the garage. So I get people come, they see I've got quart jars full of coins that we found locally here. They go, man, that's amazing. I say, here, let me show you something else. And I bring this 5-gallon bucket around into the shop, and I go, what's all that junk? I said, that is what you're going to dig when you want to dig this.
Exactly. Exactly. They need to do that with the videos, to just show the reality of things. I had a person, that's been a few years ago now, they had gotten into the hobby, got themselves a machine, and somebody told them, said, well, you're in Josh's neck of the woods, you should look him up. So he wanted to go out hunting. And we met up, we discussed a place to go, nice neutral ground, and I told him, I said, the first thing is, if you don't like digging trash, this may not be the hobby for you, because you see it on the commercials, you see it in the videos. We don't go out every day and find a gold ring. Sure, we'd love to, but it just doesn't happen that way. And we go up to this place we're going to hunt, and I'll bet you I didn't even have the machine on for 45 seconds, popped the plug, and I just kind of shook my head and said, well, it's not supposed to be like this. And he's just looking at me. He's like, what do you got there? Pulled it up out of the ground and showed him. It was a 10-carat vintage diamond cluster setting band.
Oh boy.
And I told him, I said, I'm telling you, it does not happen like this all the time.
No, it doesn't.
Well, years ago when I was living down in Louisiana, I was using a coin dredge on one of the old beaches down there, and I had a friend of mine. I took him out, and he'd never done metal detecting, never done dredging, so he thought it was cool. He was out there helping me carry it in, and spend the day in the water with me. He just thought it was neat to see the stuff coming up. So after 3 or 4 trips out there, he turns to me and says, "Hey, what am I going to get out of this?" Because he saw rings, he saw coins. I told him, I said, "I tell you what, Mark, the next good signal you get, the next good thing that comes out of the sluice box is yours." It was a stainless Rolex.
Wow.
So, he says, "Man, this is great." I'm like, "Yeah, all right. Well, that I should have tempered that offer."
How many times have you been asked, Andy? How many times you've been asked, "Can I pay for the machine?"
If that's the case, I tell them, McDonald's is hiring.
There you go. And I always
Good
tell
answer.
them, well, maybe you got to get out of it. That's the first order of business. Number 2, you need to take a little training. We'll work with you on it. And number 3, don't count on paying for one.
Right.
You're getting out there, finding some stuff. You may get some nice relics. You may get some nice, some vintage coins, a ring or two. But what you have seen from me is years, I mean literally years of metal detecting. And it takes a long time to accumulate some of this stuff. So it doesn't happen overnight. You got to get out and use that machine.
Well, I think a lot of people get into this and they just figure it's, I see people changing detectors like most people change shirts. I mean, every time you see them post, they're with a different machine. And Martin Wright's a guy I know over in England, and his philosophy is he does his research, he buys a machine, but his philosophy is he will not sell that machine till he's found enough to pay for it. And he said he does that because it forces him to learn the machine and use it long enough to make an informed decision. And he says, my finds always drop off. When I get a new machine, they always drop off until I've got that machine dialed in and mastered. Then my finds take off. And then I can figure out if I want to buy something else. But he never sells his machine until he's paid for it with what he's found.
Well,
that's a good way to do it, too.
One story similar to Josh's from customers. He decided he wanted an E-Track. Now, Bob and I have traveled together. We've hunted gold together on all sorts of scales, all the way up to where I was working with him at 100 tons an hour. And he wanted an E-Track. So when he goes to Florida in the winter, he had some detecting he could do on the beaches. He decided he wanted to do that. Well, the wife wasn't keen on it, but he bought it anyway. He got it. She got a little miffed over it, but not too bad. They drive to Florida that fall. About winter time. They park the camper in their spot down here. He gets it all straight. He throws a chair outside. He gets it all ready to go. And he sits down, cracks a beer, takes one sip of beer, and she comes out and looks at him. I thought you bought that metal detector to use it. Well, yeah, I did. So he decided, all right, he gets up, he gets it out. He'd had it all charged up, ready to go, been going through some settings, different things. He had your book, Andy, and I told him to go through that. And I said, you got questions? Call me. You got my number in your cell phone. Call me. He got up, went to the entrance to the beach, walked out on the beach, did a couple swings, set the unit up, walking down along the edge of the beach. He tells me he went 15 yards, got a signal, dug it, got a 2.2 carat diamond cluster ring, 18 karat gold, picked it up, looked at it, put it over his pinky, said, well, I ain't going to beat this today. Walked back over to his chair. His beer was still sitting there sweating. Set the detector down. He's drinking a beer. She came out of the camper and said, I thought you were going detecting. And he said, I had that ring set up in the sun so it would glisten. And he just moved.
I'm good for today.
He walked over. Yep, this is a true story. Bob Sanders is his name. She saw that. She pulled it off his hand. He said the problem with that was it didn't fit. So he had to take it in, remount the diamond, and spend more money than almost to get on the detector. but that's a true story. First 15 minutes, and he paid for a detector. It can't happen. And Bob has never had an argument out of her on a pulse induction. Anything he wants, he gets.
It just takes that one good find.
When I was living in Georgia, I had a friend of mine that was I worked with, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to Florida on vacation. Can I borrow one of your metal detectors?" So my wife still kills me every time I lend all my stuff out, but I gave him an XCal. Gave an XCal to go down. He comes back a week later. He says, "I want to buy one. I want to buy this metal detector." I said, "Why?" He found a gold Rolex and 5 gold rings. I said, "Forget it.
That makes a sale."
Take up golf, take up fishing, take up something, because you're never going to have a week like that again.
Right, you're not going to top it. You're done in the hobby.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
Great story.
Well, I always tell my friends, I got a couple of friends of mine that have found Rolexes. I go out with them, I find a Timex, and it quit ticking.
Yeah, that's usually my luck. They find Rolexes, I get Timexes.
I get Timexes. True story.
Well, Chuck, you talk about going out with people. So, Charlene, I mean, if you ever want to go out with somebody and get smoked, just take my wife out with you. So we've got
I've heard that story many times from
we've got property down in Vicksburg near the battlefield. And I'm inside. I'm working on the house, and she was helping me. I said, "Look, why don't you go out? Let me go. I've got to do some measurements here, and I got to do some mental thinking here. So why don't you take the detector, go out, and see if you can find a shell fragment or something." So she goes out 10 minutes, not even 5 minutes later, she's back in the house. I said, "What, are you back already?" She's got a shell frag from a 9-inch Dahlgren gun in her hand. I'm like, "Where the hell did you find that?" She goes, "Up by the bush." I'm like, "Shit."
I'm not saying a word. You got smoked.
Well, it gets better. So I said, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "Go out and find a gold coin now." So she's out there hunting, and then I go out hunting. I said, "Look, it's getting dark. Let's leave." So I'm waiting. I said, "Are you coming around?" I'm yelling around the house. "Are you coming? Let's go." She comes over. She says, "Put your hand out." I'm like, I put my hand out. She drops this thing in my hand. And this yard, it's a fenced-in yard, dead-end street. And she's got a 14-karat gold Adidas charm with a 10-karat gold chain, $650 or $80 melt value that she pulled out 5 inches down in the backyard of this house. I'm like, "All right, I'm done. I'm done."
Right, yep, going, "That's it."
She told me I should have seen the look on your face.
I was like, I'm holding a shell in one hand, and then she dumps this in my other. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Because you can tell right away it was gold, even through the dirt. I'm like, "All right, it's not plated." I'm like, and you feel the weight. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" $680 melt value.
I'd have told her you're buying dinner tonight.
Right. Of course, you never know. She'd have probably just laughed and said, "No, you are. Let's go."
No, we're in this field. We're in a 500-acre field in England. We're just about wrapping up for the day. I'm walk over to see how she's doing, and she hadn't found a whole lot. So we're walking back, and she's kind of just swinging her detectors. We're talking, gets a signal. As she bends down to dig it, she sees the edge of the coin sticking up out of the clump of dirt. And it turned out it's a 2nd century Roman coin, silver coin, that looked like it was lost the day it was minted.
Wow.
10-inch deep holes, and she sees this coin sticking out of a clod of dirt.
Wow.
But she knows her machine. That's the thing. I mean, I always tell people,
definitely.
Doesn't have to use the most. She knows that machine better than the people that designed it, just about.
It sounds like it. And it sounds like if it's there to be found, she's going to stumble on it.
Yes, she is. She's a good detectorist.
Right. Do you ever try to say, "Yep, I taught her everything I know"?
There you go.
I can say that now, but she's probably listening on the other side, so I probably shouldn't say that.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure she's probably still in the chat. Got to watch what you say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only time that I ever really trumped someone one day was in England 2 years ago. I'm at Chicago Ron's barn tour. We're out in this, I don't know how many acre field. It's huge. Ron is down on one knee. I'm kind of cutting across. I see him there, and I cut across, and I go down a little different. About 20 yards in front of him, I get I'm using the Equinox. It banged 13, 14, 13, 14, boom, and I popped an 1806 3 guinea gold piece. He's looking at me, and I held it up, and all I said was, gold. He said, I got to go now. I got to go right now. He's yelling at me. He found gold. He come over. He said, you cut me off on that. I said, you're sitting on the ground talking on the telephone for 45 minutes. That thing had to be found, and I wasn't going to wait on you. He didn't know what to say to that.
Right.
We were doing a field in England, and one of the guys comes over to radio. He says, hey, did they make gold coins in the 1800s? I'm like, what? Yeah, why? So he comes running like as a beeline across the field with both hands clasped together. He comes passing people, and they're all like, what did you find? He didn't say anything. He just came right over to me, and he's got this gold sovereign in his hand. But when we went back over to where he found it, there were footprints all around that. So all you got to do is be off by an inch. You might as well not be in the same field. He just happened to get his coil over that because everybody else had walked right around it and didn't get their coil over that spot of ground.
Yep, miss it by an inch, miss it by a mile.
Yep.
That's right. David Millette on the same trip. The first day we're out, or second day, excuse me, he hollers at us on the radio, all of us, saying, hey, I got this thing's about 8 inches long, 9 inches long, and it's wound, and he said, I think it's gold. So right then and there, I'm a quarter. We run. Ron takes off on a dead run. We all but run to him, and he's got that 9 inches of torque. And he went over it, but he saw it before he went over it. It was actually sticking out of the ground. It had just been plowed up. It's broken off. Well, later in the week, he brought his Equinox 600 with him. He's a customer of mine. He hands it to me. I don't know how to use this. So I sat down with him. I went in. I set up a program in there, just like I told you, Andy, pretty close to the same. I tried to adjust it a little bit for where we're hunting. The first hour he used that, he's out 75 yards from me, and he's yelling at me. He says, I think I got gold again. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I went over, and he's got a full guinea, 1807, and he dug that at 10, 11 inches. He said, I like that program you put in there. I said, well,
I bet you do.
Holy smokes. But it happened. And that thing hadn't been used 2 hours total time in his hands. It was brand new. We put that program in there, and he smoked that. And Ron looked at me a little later. He says, you know what? He said, that guy has more luck. And I said, yeah, well, he got over it. He heard it. He dug it. That's the last dimension of discrimination. He made the dig. And
right.
Beautiful. This thing was beautiful condition. Didn't scratch it. Didn't bang it up. It's just a gorgeous coin.
Right.
So out of the box, it happens. It does happen.
Well, like you said, though, the best discrimination is your brain. I mean, I go back to Todd again. So Todd's philosophy always is, if when in doubt, dig it out. If you're not sure,
you are the final discriminator.
Don't spend 10 minutes trying to sweep over it to say is it good or not. Just dig the damn thing out, particularly if you're out in the woods or the field. Just dig the damn thing and move on.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I was doing a lot of that today, digging it and moving on, going, yep, that ain't what I was looking for. I got a nice pouch of trash. I got a few things, but nothing major.
Well, beach hunting is a different kind of hunting. I know that when I was down there in Myrtle Beach, my daughter lives in Charleston, so we'd go up to Myrtle Beach. And, you always try to get out at low tide. So low tide's sometime in the day and sometimes at night. I said, all right, well, low tide's at 2:30 in the morning. There'll be nobody out on the beach. I'll go out there at 2:30 in the morning and hunt the low tide. Let me just tell you, there is some weird stuff going on that beach at 2:30 in the morning. It's not That's the one time I was hunting the beach with no headphones.
Wow. So, well, I'm going to back out for you fellas again. Thank you, Andy. Great great doings on your books. You've helped a lot of people understand what our hobby's about and what they've got in their hands, and continue to do so. And all the contributors and that kind of stuff. And as people go along, and if they really take time, and guys, I know you hate to hear this, if there's anybody that just started out there, pick up the manual, look through it, read it, then go out and apply what you got. Don't listen to John Doe that's been detecting 1 year and he's got a killer program way out there. Try and understand the soils you're working in, what kind of mineralization you have, and start going from there. Take it simple, take it easy, and it'll start to give you some returns that you're just going to be astounded with.
Well, Chuck, I mean,
Right.
your input, appreciate the input you provided to the book. The bio, I've got your little bio in the back there. Unfortunately, that first picture you sent me with you on the bearskin rug in front of the fire, we didn't use that.
Here we go. You and Pacifico. Couldn't have, I'll tell you.
Right.
Hey, your books went out in the mail today, or not in the mail. They went out by UPS today, Chuck, so you should have them in a few days.
Okay, I'll meet them at home next week. So have
Good
a great
deal.
night, everybody.
All right.
Thanks for the call, Chuck. One
You're
more
welcome, Josh. Thank you.
One more story before we go. Chuck was talking about, getting outdone or outdoing. I had gotten a call for a ring hunt, and it was cold that morning. A friend of mine texted me. He was wanting to get out and hunt that day because cabin fever's setting in and everything. And I tell him, well, that'd be nice, but I can't do that. I've got to go after this ring. I told him I'd give it a shot this morning, and he got a little upset, and he says, well, fine, I'll just go out and hunt by myself then. All right, well, good luck to you. You have at it. And, I don't know, it was maybe 45 minutes later, I get a text from him. He was all tickled with himself. He had found himself a ring. And I turned around and fired right back and sent him a text back of the ring that I had found and told him, said, I've already returned mine to the owner. And he said, oh, whatever. And I don't hear anything for a while, and an hour or so goes by, and he sends me another text. He's just tickled pink. He found himself a silver Roosevelt dime, and he's all proud. He wants to show it off. It's his first silver of the year, and I don't answer him back. I just stay quiet. And finally he calls me a few minutes later, and he says, what, you ain't got nothing to say about that? I said, well, actually, I don't have time. I have to get home before my phone dies because I posted something on Facebook and my phone's just blowing up. My battery's about dead. And he's like, what do you do? I said, well, I returned that ring and they gave me permission to hunt the rest of the yard, and I hit an 1894 San Francisco Mint Barber $50. And he gets quiet for a second and he says, when you sent me that message with your ring and telling me you had returned it to your owner, I was starting to think I didn't like you very much. I said, yeah? He says, now I know I don't, and hung up on me.
Now, hopefully he was kidding, because, I mean,
He
I've run into
was.
people that would not be kidding. They do that, and we talked about that they get, jealous of what you found. And, I hate being around people like that. I mean, how many times have you seen where somebody is all excited, they went out and they found a barber quarter, and they post it.
Yep.
And then you get the great find, and somebody says, well, I found 3 of those last week.
Yeah, it just takes the wind right out of their sails. I mean, you should be supportive of them.
My wife, when we were over in England one time, she wanted to find a Crodel bell. That was her bucket list item. Not a gold coin, not a medieval coin. She wanted a Crodel bell. So she comes over to radio one day and she's like, I got my bucket list item. I'm ready to go home. People are going, what, did you find a gold coin? No, I found a Crodel bell. So she posts it online later that night. And the next day, somebody at the club in Michigan says, I found 2 of them in a park yesterday.
Right.
Okay.
And it's like, really, why you got to be like that? Why can't you just, I mean, if you're going to be like that about it, just don't comment at all.
that's it. If you don't go, just keep on going. Go to the next post.
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely kept you on for quite some time here. Is there anything else you would like to add before we roll out?
No, again, I appreciate the opportunity. Enjoy talking to you and your listeners. I think we're all hoping that 2021 is not a repeat of 2020. I think COVID has clearly changed the world as we know it.
Unfortunately,
even things like going overseas. I mean, we had to cancel trips to England and Scotland as well as the spring trip to Scotland. So we're hoping that by the fall
and the boot camps.
Yeah, that we're able to start getting back on the road with boot camps and taking people overseas and letting them enjoy the history of Scotland. But we're hoping the vaccines will do what they claim to do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time. Once again, the stories have been excellent, very enjoyable. Always a pleasure to speak with you, and hopefully there are plenty of people out there that will glean information from the latest book and look forward to the next book as well, which they can get that at their favorite dealer or even over at Treasure Hunting Outfitters. I've been dropping the link in there. Hang in there with me for a few minutes, Andy. We'll get out of here. For everyone else, if you enjoyed the show, make sure and stop by Crazy Spider Adventures and Shooters and Prospectors. Throw them a like, check out Treasure Hunting Outfitters, and we'll see you on the next one.